Okay, today is November the 20th, 2007, and my name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with the OSU Library. We're doing an oral history project called Women of the Oklahoma Legislature, and today I'm with Bernice Shedrick from Stillwater in her law office here in Stillwater, and she served in the Senate from 81 to 96. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct. And so thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Let's start by having you tell a little bit about your childhood and then we'll work forward.
Okay. Well, I was born in Chickasha, Oklahoma on August 9, 1940 to Irene Mae Williams Link and Arthur Cole Link Sr. And of my two parents, I was the oldest of four siblings. Now, both of my parents had been married before, both had deceased spouses, and both had children of a prior marriage. But there were the four of us who were reared in the household together, along with an older brother, half-brother, Robert, who was about 7 years older than I. And we all grew up there until both of my parents died. And that happened, my father died when I was approximately 11 years old and my mother when I was 13. My older brother was serving in the Korean War during that period of time. He was married. His spouse, who was just a 19-year-old young woman, attending then what was called Oklahoma College for Women in Chickasha, Oklahoma, came out to our home and helped take care of the four of us for a very short period of time. And to her, to this day, I owe a great deal of gratitude and appreciation for her attempt to keep the four of us young siblings together, though we were later separated. Each of us went to live with a family member. I went to live, though, with my older brother when he came, and my sister-in-law, Sherry, and he later returned from the Korean War period of time and decided to finish his undergraduate college. First of all, we moved from Chickasha, before he came back from the Korean War, I moved from Chickasha, Oklahoma to Wynnewood, Oklahoma with my sister-in-law, who was only 6 or 7 years older than I, but quite a role model. She was a very intelligent woman, still is, full of life, and had a lot to offer in the rearing of her young little sister-in-law. And so we moved there because that was her hometown, and her parents still lived there. So I got to be the new girl on the block. And I was fortunate enough that year to be elected president of my class, which was freshman class in high school, and I was elected a cheerleader. So that really helped my self-esteem from having lost both of my parents in a very short period of time, and also to be physically separated from my brothers and sisters. And she and her family just really open-armedly accepted me, and we did a lot of things together as a family. And I'm deeply grateful not only to her, and my older brother, who's now deceased, but to her family as well. We later then moved to Norman, Oklahoma for a year when he decided to go ahead and secure his education, and then later to Edmond, Oklahoma. And that's where I met my husband, who we were married for some 32, 33 years. We were divorced, but we remained very, very close friends. He recently passed away last year.
And that's what brought you to Stillwater, then?
Yes, that's what brought us to Stillwater. His family was in the jewelry business, and there was a Shedrick jewelry store here. And so in 1966, I believe, yes, I'm believing that's correct, 65 or 66, we moved here so that he could manage the Shedrick jewelry store. And by that time, we had 3 children. Our daughter, Crystal, our middle child, Michael Scott, and our youngest son, Stephen Link, all Shedrick children. Our middle child is deceased. He died when he was 24 years old in 1985.
So you've gone up on 40 years here in Stillwater.
Yes, ma'am.
60.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so your interest in politics started when you ran for president of the high school? Or before then?
Actually, my quest to be involved perhaps in political decisions or decisions that were made by the legislature actually occurred after I was teaching school here in Stillwater and involved with developing the curriculum of what then was touted as an open school process, which now is Skyline Elementary, But at the time, it was developed on a lot of theories by Bruno and other Piaget and other learning experts who our school board at that time decided to try that adventure. And so I was on the team with other teachers who that year decided to try to write the curriculum for that new school. And it was our then superintendent of schools who encouraged me through that process. We were trying to select materials, and I became a little upset, you might say, in the way that the state mandated to us that we use only one textbook in a classroom with 30 to 40 children, assuming that everybody was a visual learner. Mm-hmm. And I knew that wasn't true. And I thought that's a real hardship on a child that's an auditory learner, to give them a book and say, read, when that wasn't their best avenue of learning. So when I expressed those concerns to the superintendent, he said, well, why don't you just go down to the legislature with me sometime, and let's appear in front of one of the committees on the education committee, and maybe you could offer some testimony. And that's what I did. First time I was ever there was long before I ever ran for public office or even thought I wanted to. But I remember walking in that huge Capitol, and it was actually the second time I'd been in that Capitol. The first time was when I was a sixth grader, and I went with my sixth grade class, and I was very much in awe and thought it was a beautiful building. But that second time I went, I was teaching school. And when I went into that committee and I listened to some of the questions that were being asked of me, and the responses I would give, and then still wanting some information or thinking they needed more information and making some decisions, I thought, I believe I could do this. I believe I could do this, and I think I could do it very well. And later on, I was encouraged by a number of people to consider that race, and I did. And when I was elected, it was in 1980, there were no other women serving in the legislature, in the Senate. Now, there were in the House of Representatives, but not in the Senate. Now, there had been two other women prior to the time I was elected in 1980 that did serve in the House. Mm-hmm. One was Mrs. Lamar Looney from Ardmore, Oklahoma, and that was in the 20s. And the second person was a woman that was from Oklahoma City, and she served only one term. So when I came, that was it. We had no dual facilities, bathroom facilities for men and women. And so I suggested to the president pro tem at that time that if I was going to serve, I believed that I'd been a teacher. I knew how to properly, wait my turn or take numbers teasingly. Mm-hmm. And it was at that time they decided perhaps they ought to renovate that antiquated building and realize that women would be coming to the Oklahoma Senate, and perhaps it would be in the best interest of everyone serving that we have at least two facilities, for which we did. And so that was the headline story for quite a while, is that I got a bathroom, among other things.
And is it still the same one, or have they even?
It's still the same one.
Haven't expanded any?
No, ma'am. In fact, what it originally was is a telephone booth that they just turned around and put a door on the other side. Only it was much larger and much nicer than that my colleagues, the men, were utilizing. So it's been there for the women that have come to serve. Unfortunately, in my opinion, there's not been enough women elected in the state Senate. But for those that have, they worked very hard to get there, regardless of what political affiliation they had. And I'm proud of them for making that effort, because it's a tremendous effort and an unbelievable sacrifice that you have to make to be in public office, in my opinion, and to run a race like that. You literally just place everything about you out there in front of the public and say, here I am. And unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot of people are attacked, not necessarily for one's own self or one's own decision-making ability, but something to do with their family member, or something that's, in my opinion, not appropriate to try to win a race on. But that's not the way races are won in politics today.
So you ran back in the 80s. Did you have a particular strategy on how you go about winning?
Oh, yes. I believed, and I still believe today, that I had to get to know my voters, the people that I was going to be representing. Mm-hmm. I felt like it would be a big disservice to them if I were elected, fortunate enough to be elected, to go down there and cast votes in their behalf if I didn't know who they were. So I walked doors in my entire district 2 times that year to get to know as many voters as possible, so that if I was elected, and I was, by a very small margin, I might say, I wanted to know when I was casting that vote, I wanted to know who I was voting in behalf of. And I did explain to my constituents that at the same time, I was a law school student. I had just started law school. And so I did tell them that, I would do my very best if elected to represent them. But that there would be times that I knew that, due to the circumstances, I would probably have more information in my hand about the measures I'd be voting upon and wouldn't be able necessarily at that moment to consult with them with a vote going on. Mm-hmm. And that I would use the knowledge, that I would use the knowledge that I had learned along with the ideas they had expressed to me about what they believed their government should do for them, with them, and on behalf of them.
If it's a close race, do you remember election night?
150 votes. That's how close it was in the primary. In the general election, that was the year that Ronald Reagan was elected president, and I had 77% of the vote in my district then, in the general election in November.
Did you ever run against another woman?
No. But I did have other opponents during that period of time that I was in office.
Your first one, was it an incumbent?
He was. He had previously been, and was at the time, the chairman of the Higher Education Committee, so that was pretty tough, and he had been there for 16 years. But the same thing I heard on the doorstep from the people who elected me was the same message that rang true to me when I decided to leave the Senate. I knocked on many a door, and for many people they said, I don't have any hard feelings or any misgivings about the current senator. However, he's been there for 16 years, and I think it's time for a change. Well, at the end of my 16 years, those same thoughts came back to me, and I thought, I believed it then, and there's absolutely nothing that I have seen appear since then that has changed my mind. And I think that 16 years is enough, and I think it is time for me to go home. Plus the fact that I was then fortunate to have 2 grandchildren and expecting our third. And I really, really wanted to spend quality time with my grandchildren, because you just don't get overs when it comes to rearing of children and grandchildren. And I think grandchildren, that's something I missed out on as a child, was the input from parents from 13 on, and especially grandparents. They were deceased before I was born. And it was very, very important to me to at least to be able to pass along to my grandchildren some of their history of their family, and thoughts from time to time about wise decision making and choices that you make and the consequences that come when you make a choice, and how you should think about those choices before you make them.
Well, did you live there while you were in session?
No,
or
ma'am.
Did you commute?
I drove every day, back and forth. The only time that I did spend time at the Capitol overnight was near the end of the legislative session. I was fortunate enough to be on our Appropriations Committee, and the Appropriations Committee has their work cut out for them, especially the last 6 weeks of the legislative session. It seems as if you are in continual, nonstop meetings. It seems as if all the information you've been dealing with all legislative session long is now being updated, and that you need to get the most recent information put together, and you need to be in the process of writing the legislation. So that's a very time-consuming time. And when I first started serving, we didn't have a time limit as to the day that we were to be out of session. So we often went into the summer months. And the last 6 weeks of the legislative session, there were at least a couple of weeks that I would stay down in Oklahoma City overnight, because it was I never knew whether I was going to be called to come vote at 2 o'clock in the morning, or have to go proof something that had come off of the press with my staff at midnight. So you were pretty much on call 24/7.
Well, on the swearing-in day, do you remember who all was there? Or
I do. My first swearing-in day? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My family was in the balcony. I remember standing there looking at the board that had my name on it. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that really stood out at me was, there are 48 here, and I've got to have 24 votes in mine to pass legislation. And I started looking around thinking, how am I going to do that? I'm the only woman here. How can I be that influential? And I for a few minutes, had a few self-doubts about, I hope I've not done my constituents a disservice because I intend to be here and make some decisions that are going to help them. Mm-hmm. But I did learn quickly that I read every bill. And I didn't get up to speak unless I really knew what I was talking about. And I chose the bills to really debate. I very carefully chose the ones that were extremely important to my district. So that when I did make a debate, it was forceful, and it was something that the members of the Senate took seriously, and they knew I was serious.
Do you remember the first one?
No, I'm not sure I remember the first one, but I can tell you this. The first year I was there was the year that our pro tem decided that the Oklahoma Legislature was going to attempt to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Okay. And of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the process. It's first passed by Congress, but then it has to be ratified by a number of the states before it can actually become law when an amendment to the Constitution is made. So we were on the short list. And that was quite a tumultuous session that year. And I never shall forget, sitting behind me was a gentleman that had been in the Senate for many years, was really a constitutional expert. And here we are in debate on national TV, and I'm sitting, turning, looking at him, and the cameras are all on us. And I'm the lone woman there. And so he is making his plea, his closing remarks, and he said to them, "Gentlemen of the Senate." And I'm right there, as if I'm invisible. "If you have prayed over this matter as I have, then you'll be voting no on the ratification." That really bothered me for a couple of reasons. One, I was not a gentleman. I was a lady of the Senate, and he'd failed to even recognize that. Though I think he's a fine man. I mean, I don't personally harbor anything. I just felt like it was a tragic mistake for Oklahoma, in the eyes of the whole United States, for a woman to be sitting there as a member of the Senate and not even being recognized as a woman. And I never held myself out necessarily to be a woman. I held myself out to be a senator. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be a good senator. And I wanted to be a senator for whom my word was good. And if I gave it, I kept it. And I believe that's the reputation I created. But when he made that statement and told them that he had prayed over it, I jokingly leaned over and said, "Senator, I too have prayed about this matter." And she said, and it just absolutely, and the good Lord said, and I said, "I too have prayed to the good Lord about this." And she said, well, it just went all over him, and I was teasingly saying that, but I wanted him to get the message, and I think he did. The ERA ratification did not pass. We missed it by one vote, but there was a lot of good debate in those years about the equality of wages for women. I mean, never before had there been this comparison that at that time, women of the same job description, same education, same everything but for gender, was making 59 cents on the dollar as compared to the gentleman, same qualifications, same job description, making $1. And I think it really created a forum, if you will, to be able to discuss those issues that were long overdue.
How did the House women stack up with that decision? Do you remember?
Oh, I think that there were 12 that year in the House, and a good number of them supported that ratification. I can't remember the exact vote. They had to have passed it for it to come to us. Passed the House first, then it came to us, and we got down to one vote. We were trying to get the tie vote because we felt like if we did, we believed at that time that the lieutenant governor would possibly go with us and break the tie. I never heard him personally make that commitment, and that was Lieutenant Governor Spencer Bernard, who's now deceased. Fine gentleman.
So what other committees did you chair?
I chaired the Education Committee for a number of years. I chaired the Subcommittee on Education Appropriations, which dealt with 2/3 of the state money to be distributed. I, at one time, was on the Retirement Committee, for which during those years we had many, many problems, and we had to fix, if you will, the insolvency of the retirement funds for the state, and we did. during that period of time. I also chaired the Judiciary Committee as a lawyer after I received my law degree in 1983. And I served on a couple of other committees. The Economic Development Committee. I was very interested in any aspect to bring and encourage economic development for our state.
So during those like 80 to 83, then you were a mother, legislator, and a student.
I was.
How did you juggle all of that?
Very difficultly, and with a lot of prayer, winging a prayer. Mm-hmm. I prayed a lot, drove a lot of miles, worked really, 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 really hard, very, very hard. But it was something I really wanted to do, and something that I had a commitment to do. I know my husband at the time asked me when I ran for public office, he says, I don't understand anybody wanting to do this. And I said, well, and though he was very supportive, he just said, I don't understand. And I said, well, it's something like joining the circus. It just gets in your blood. And his remark was, well, thank goodness you don't want to join the circus. But all my family was very, very supportive. And my youngest child at the time was 16. He had just received his driver's license, so it was very helpful that he could do that. Mm-hmm. Because he could at least drive himself home after school, and I didn't have to be there to do that.
Or did they visit you when it was in session and watch?
Yes,
watch
they
Mom
did.
in action?
They did. All three of them served, I believe, as no. My oldest child did not. She had already served as a page, but yes, I encouraged them to be a part of it. We had a lot of dinner table discussions. In fact, my children always said, I can't ever remember a meal during those years that when we did not sit down and my mother would say, now this is not for publication. However, what would you think if, and I would always throw a query out there, if you had this problem to resolve, how do you feel about X? And it was interesting to watch their young reactions.
Did either one of them be in politics, you think, someday?
No. At least they've not expressed that to me, except that my daughter, at the time that we passed, I believe to be one of the most comprehensive reform bills in terms of education when we passed House Bill 1017 in the legislature. I was a co-author and one of the main, if you will, captains of getting that bill passed. My daughter was president of a local PTA here, and so she chose to take her PTA members, mothers, grandmothers, and everybody else, and go help man whatever needed to be done in the classrooms so that the teachers could come to the Capitol to speak to their legislators about those issues. And she also organized a lot of parents and grandparents who likewise came to the Capitol to express to their legislators and to others the importance of this magnificent education reform bill.
She's active in different ways.
Yes.
So that's good too.
Yes.
Can you describe a typical day? Like how early would you get there?
A typical day. I'm hoping this is typical as best I can remember. But usually the alarm clock goes off about 5:30, 6 o'clock. And on some days, depending on whether or not I had to chair an education committee, which started at 10, I would come to the office and see clients sometimes. Before I was an attorney, I did not have to do that. But during that period of time, and I became an attorney in 83, so I only had 2 sessions. And if not, I was studying. I would then go to Oklahoma City, start my committee hearing at 10 o'clock, convene the committee hearing sometime during the noon hour, at which time I would go to my office, close the door, get the bills out for the day, and read my bills that were going to be on the afternoon agenda. The entire afternoon, while in session, we were voting, discussing, debating bills. At the same time, my staff members were sending notes in and out to me, we need to have you check this. So I had a lot of legwork during that period of time. I was either on the floor or going out to meet with the staff and doing something that we had to do to get a bill ready for committee. After session was over, generally speaking, I stayed to make certain that if I had a committee hearing soon, I met with the staff and we decided what bills were going to be on the agenda. And we went through each and every bill trying to decide, what we could hear. And then many times there were committee meetings after session, depending upon the period of time, because The legislative session is divided into weeks in which you must get all bills out of committee from the origin of the House. Then you've got another couple of weeks in there which you must get all bills off of the floor from the origin of their House. Then that flip-flops, and you go through another 2 weeks of reading bills from the other House in committee, and then you go through another 2 or 3 weeks of reading those bills from opposite origins that made it out of committee onto the floor. Once you get through that, then you have what we call the General Conference Committee bills, and that's when you have to go meet with usually 3 members in the House, 3 members of the Senate, and you hear those bills, and you try to decide whether or not the bill is meritorious, and if it is, what's worth saving, and what can you do, and how are you going to fix supposedly the problem that's developed as a result of the request. So that's what we would do, and sometimes I would have a dinner meeting that I'd have to go to with constituents who would come up. There'd be a huge banquet. They expected you to be there. Depending if that banquet got over at 9 or 10 o'clock, or if I had just a general dinner meeting with other members of the Senate or other members of the constituency from my district, oftentimes I wouldn't get home before 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. I have to fall in bed and sleep fast.
And read fast
And read fast.
during the day.
And then my weekend was spent on Fridays. I would go to court, do my cases in court. Saturdays and Sundays I was here at the law office. So it's a huge, huge sacrifice. Huge sacrifice. I don't know how the men and women who have very small children adjust that balance between quality time with their children and serving in the legislature, because it's extremely demanding.
Well, what was the culture like in being the only woman? Did you?
At the time, the average age of the gentleman in the Senate was, I'm thinking, 65, and I was 40. They'd been there, most of them, a long time. That was before term limits. You might say it was a club in that respect,
Right.
in terms of fraternalism, so to speak. And so there were a lot of events that I was not included in. And I knew it, I knew it. But I gained their respect, more importantly, by reading every bill. And soon it was on the floor. Many of them would come over and say, "Shedrick, what's in this bill?" Because they hadn't had time. It's an immense amount of dedication you have to make to be able to read every bill that comes on the floor before it's voted upon. Sometimes you don't get to it until there it is.
Well, did you socialize much with the women from the House?
As we tried every chance we would get, and we loved it. We just loved that opportunity. It was great. I must tell you this, that one of the most exciting times, I served with many fine women in the Oklahoma Senate and House, but it was especially rewarding for me when one more lawyer got elected, woman lawyer. And that was Senator Miles LaGrange, a beautiful black woman that now serves as a federal judge. And it was really interesting because I could be having a conversation with any of the other women members of the Senate, and it wasn't always in suspect. But Senator Miles LaGrange and I noted on several occasions when we were in conference together, they would always go, "Don't know, what are they cooking up?" We'd laugh. Do
you stay in touch with her?
I do. She's a fine young woman.
What about some of the other?
I do. I really try to maintain that contact because I don't get to see them as often as I would like. And on occasion, though I haven't been able to do that in some time, and I'm not even sure if they still have it, but we used to have what we called an old-timers night in the Senate, when men and women who had served since statehood would try to come back, if they're still living, would come for an evening in Oklahoma City and a dinner. And it was like walking through the history books of Oklahoma. It was wonderful.
It'd be nice if they still do that.
I'm thinking that it's been at least 2 or 3 years since I've been to an event like that, and I'm hoping that they'll do it again because it was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Well, this year would have been a good year.
Yes, and we didn't do it.
Are there any other bills you want to talk about specifically that you're proud of?
Well,
That course,
I think
probably good.
perhaps
We need to-
the major piece of legislation that I was really, really dedicated to, among others, was House Bill 1017, and because that was the biggest major reform bill we had ever passed in the legislature at that time. And what it did, it put schools on notice at that time that your curriculum had to be such that your graduates could matriculate to a comprehensive university. And if not, then your school was going to go on probation. And that really put back in the individual districts the opportunity for the local school boards to really do some self-examination about their schools and the kind and type of curriculum they knew they were going to have to try to offer. And it just so happened that several of our smaller schools were able to go together and co-op so that they could teach physics and they could teach some of those more advanced classes that allowed their students to be able to score high enough on a SAT exam to qualify to go to a comprehensive university in Oklahoma. And yes, it was, among other things, we lowered the class size. We had early childhood education. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things were in that bill.
And how did you get your 24 votes for that one then?
A lot of hard work. A lot of hard work. Took a major conference, Democratic conference, with all the members of the Democratic Party, and every one of them had to vote for it because unfortunately at that time we couldn't get any Republican votes. I think we did get one out of that. Even though Henry Bellman was our governor then, whom I respect so very much, he was having a difficult time getting members of his own party to support it. So it was our Democratic caucus that came up with those votes and finally passed that bill. It passed the House and it was up to the Senate. And we did do that. And the bill was signed in Tulsa, and it was in 1990. It was a fabulous opportunity to get many neighborhoods around the state, and we did. We had chambers of commerce. We had so many people who stepped up to the plate on that issue and said, "This is something we must do. We must do."
Has it been revisited then since then?
Oh yes, there's been major amendments and different types of legislation passed that have improved upon it, without a doubt. But it was the first time that we had really looked at each and every individual school without just saying, "Okay, this one we're going to close you down." We didn't do that. We said, you stay where you are, but you've got to make certain that the students that you have are going to get the proper kind of education. So you as a local school board have got to sit down, with your teachers and with your public and decide how are you going to see to it that these students get the curriculum they need. And most of them did. Some of them didn't, and some of those schools no longer exist. But it was their own choosing.
You want to stop?
I think we should. Mm-hmm. Okay. I shall be back no more than 30 minutes, okay?
That's fine. Okay. We were talking about bills, weren't we?
Yes, I believe we were.
Mm-hmm. And you did one on something to do with the living will?
I did. And it was one of the first years, perhaps, maybe the second year, that the legislature had attempted to legislate something in that nature. And it was the Association of Senior Citizens in Oklahoma that approached me and asked me to consider doing that because we had nothing of record at that time that allowed, as we do now, the opportunity for one to make a living will prior to the time you might need that. And so, yes, ma'am, I did. But we weren't able to pass it the first year. It took about 3 attempts before we were able to get something like that passed into law.
Each session or 3 years?
3 years.
3 years?
Oh, at least 3 years. It might have been maybe 4. Mm-hmm.
Any major disappointments?
Major disappointments. I'm sure there were many. And when I say many, it's obvious I can't remember much because, yes, I know I had several disappointments, but as much as anything, maybe it was a personal disappointment that I experienced that really caused me some concern. And that's when a member of the Senate at that time, who no longer serves, was a chairman and had told me he would be placing my bill on an agenda and did not do it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I got into the committee room and I had many people there. In fact, I'm thinking it was that living will bill. And it was not on the agenda. And I had to find out about it at the meeting with all of my witnesses called, who were going to testify on its behalf. And I thought that was very disrespectful. There were many times when I was chairing a committee that I was not going to hear a certain bill. And if I had been requested to hear the bill by the bill's author, and I was not going to, then generally speaking, not every time, but generally speaking, I would at least try to make a phone call, if not a written response, saying, thank you very much for your request, but I will not be able to put your bill on the agenda, and give a brief explanation. If you have questions, contact me.
And you also ran for governor.
I did. I really
Let's
did.
talk a little bit about that.
Such an exciting time. Such an exciting time. It was in 1994. And it was actually, I'm thinking it was like late April, mid-April, that I decided to make that run. Maybe March at the earliest. And the person that was the person to beat, so to speak, was the then sitting Lieutenant Governor, Jack Mildren. And he had, of course, been Lieutenant Governor for a number of years and was running on the Democratic ticket. And me, being a registered Democrat, decided I wanted to challenge his candidacy and did. And so from late March until September, put together a full-fledged campaign, raised over $800,000, closer to $900,000, traveled the state, had the glorious opportunity to meet many, many Oklahomans, had a great experience in seeing people from all walks of life, all across the state. And at the end of the day, in the primary, we had a runoff because I had enough votes to force him into a runoff. And then he won it in the runoff. And so I went back to the Senate, very happy that I had made the run and very content that I was going to at least finish out the last 2 years of my political experiences in the state Senate, because I really aspired the respect of the Senate. The Senate is the continuing body of law in this state. They get elected for 4 years. House members get elected every 2 years. A governor can only run and be elected for 2 consecutive terms. That's 8. A state senator now, even with the term limits, can serve for 12. So you have that continual body that stays. To me, that's the constitutional mind, if you will, of the legislative process. And I thoroughly enjoyed being there.
Well, what prompted you to run? I mean,
For the governor?
Yeah, what went into your
Well,
processes?
again, it went back to a personal issue. I had 2 beautiful granddaughters, and I wanted them to realize that if you really want to do something, then you should decide how you're going to do it and be willing to accept the consequences of your choice. And I told them, I said, this is something that your grandmother really wants to do. I don't know if I can win it, but I'm surely going to try. And if I don't, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. We're going to make lots of friends along the way. And I wanted them to know that even if they decide to stay and live in Oklahoma and later contribute back as young mature adults and older mature adults, that they too, if they wanted to make a choice like that, could do it. But they had to make certain commitments.
Did they help campaign you?
All over the state. And how about a little girl that, was quite little, and she says to a person in Walmart in southeastern Oklahoma, would you be willing to vote for my Mimi for governor? She'll be a good Mimi. She'll be a good Mimi. She's a good Mimi, and she'll be a good governor. I had lots of help from my family. They just put everything, on hold and did what they needed to do. And they always have been.
Did you have a slogan for that particular campaign?
I think I had many. I believed in a strong economy. I had a record that showed that I had worked for a strong economy. I was one of the most fearless voices in support of quality education in Oklahoma, and I really believed that quality education would indeed be a key to one's economic freedom, and I believed very strongly that we should have a governor who was going to emphasize strong public education.
Were you the first woman to run for governor?
No.
No. Maybe Laura Board was maybe before.
No, Laura Board was after me. When I say that, I know there were other women. I'm trying to think. When? That's funny that I can't even recall, but
I'll have to look.
I don't believe that I was the first woman to run.
One of the first.
One of the first, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And your thought processes on the day that you left for the last time?
Said goodbye to many wonderful friends. I knew I would miss the camaraderie. I knew I would miss the respect of my many colleagues. But I knew it would be, as long as I knew where they were, I would be able to maintain that relationship and that respectfulness with them. I wasn't at all going to miss the fray. I'd had my share of that. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I did. I'm I'm a little bit of a tiger when it comes to attacking certain issues. I've always believed that you can compromise on the issues, but you can't compromise your principles. And there were times I had to put my foot, draw the line in the sand, and say, that's it. I've been known to take no prisoners from time to time. I don't know if that's good or bad or what, but some of them call me the steel magnolia from time to time. I had other names too, I'm sure, but probably they would not, that's not something you'd want to print, but I enjoyed it all.
How many times did your office change during those years?
My office change? What do you mean by that?
Different locations? Did you have the same one the whole time?
Well, the first year I was up on the 5th floor where all freshmen go, on the south side. And then the next year I went downstairs to the largest office there on the downstairs, except for the pro tem's office, and that's where I stayed.
And how did you get that one?
I worked for it. There was a retiring Senate pro tem. That's usually where the past Senate pro tems had their office. And it was next to the outside door that went down the hallway to all the committee rooms, and it was very convenient to get to committees from there and to get into the chamber. And so I just asked for it. And
got it.
I did. I did.
You weren't asked to give it up anywhere along the way?
No. When I left, I had been there, I believe I was in that office 14 years. In that particular office room, 14 years. I spent 2 years up on the 5th floor because those offices don't change but for election years. And see, every 2 years there would be an election cycle.
Do you have the same assistant the whole time?
I had 2.
That's pretty good.
And the one that stayed with me over the longer period of time is still there serving for Senator Morgan. And she's a valuable asset.
She knows her district well.
She does. She came up here many times and she knew the constituents and she was a dear friend.
Well, do you want to talk a little bit about the science and math school?
Oh, well, that was fun. That was fun. Senator Penny Williams and I worked together to help create that school, and we were able to get Governor Hunt at the time, who was the governor of North Carolina, to come to Oklahoma and help us discuss that with members of the legislature to encourage them to help us fund it. And it's been a jewel in the crown for Oklahomans. Many young people have graduated from there who've gone on and made major contributions in science and math to our society. They at one time had the highest composite scores of any school in the nation, year after year after year. They are always in the top echelon in terms of national and international competition in science and mathematics. These are students who, if they had not had the opportunity to come to a boarding school in Oklahoma City and be taught by highly professional people who were specialists in their area and mentored, if you will, by physicians across the street at the OU Medical Center, they would not have the aspirations that they have and the ability to go on and do and contribute like they do. We will have a Nobel Prize winner out of that school. There is absolutely no question in my mind.
And they will have used the library named after you.
They will have used the library many times that is named after me. And I'm so appreciative and so humbled by that. In fact, that was created by, actually, the primary movers on that was the Sarkey Foundation from Norman, Oklahoma, that went to the board and requested that they would be willing to give a major contribution for the building if they would name it in my behalf. And unbeknownst to me, until after the board approved all of that, I even notified that would happen. And we had a dedication a year ago last March, and it was wonderful. And it was wonderful always to be on campus with those students. They're so inspiring, so inspiring.
Well, how tough was it to get it passed?
Very tough. And you can see why, because in years when we did not have, in my opinion, sufficient funding, if you will, for all of our public schools and higher education schools, it was difficult to talk to members of the legislature who knew their own local schools were not being properly funded, that they would take money, quote unquote, out of the budget and away from their schools to have this school in Oklahoma City. And it was having to convince them that we all are there to help our districts, but we all have the greater good, which is that of the state of Oklahoma. And it's going to provide, because all the students come from all counties. It's not going to, you apply based on your ability. And many of them then, that's how it happened. We were able to educate them, and they realized that this is a step that we're going to have to make, because this will make a significant difference for Oklahoma.
Did you attend the first graduation ceremony?
I did. I did.
I would have too if I
Yes.
did
Yes.
that. Let me check something real quick. You were in office too in the Murrah building?
I was.
Do you want to?
I was on my way to Oklahoma City that morning. It happened, at 9 o'clock, and I was almost to the corner. I shall never forget. I was ready to exit off of I-35 up onto Lincoln Boulevard when I saw smoke, and I had a 10 o'clock meeting at the Capitol, and this was right about 9 o'clock. And I just absolutely could not even begin to imagine why it was coming from that direction. But it was major. It was major. And by the time I got to the Capitol, which was within 10 minutes, we were getting notices then about what had happened. And immediately our Senate went into session, and then we just dismissed for the day. Many of us went down immediately to the blood bank there, which is on 23rd Street, to get in line to get blood because there was a huge, huge need for it. I remember the days following that and the anger I felt for someone who was just so indignant to be so non-respectful of human lives, especially children, babies. My heart just grieved. I didn't realize that I was depressed, and I finally had to realize why, and it was because I just could not imagine the disdain and the disrespect that any human being could have for that many human lives. And lo and behold, I just happened to be in court in Perry, in Noble County, the next day or two within that period of time. Maybe the same evening or the next day, very close, in which I was waiting for the judge to finish up a hearing so that I could propose a bond hearing for a person that was in the Perry jail that I was representing to lower the bond for this person. It was a minor misdemeanor. It wasn't anything serious. And as it turned out, the judge didn't complete that hearing that day, and I had to wait until the end of the day, which was almost 5 o'clock, before I got to do my hearing. And the judge leaves immediately afterwards, so therefore the person downstairs that we all know later went to trial for this remained overnight in that jail. And by doing so, they were then able to put together enough evidence by the next morning. They did not release him on bond, if you remember. Yeah. History in the making.
Do you have a favorite, either campaign story or?
Yes, okay. I do.
Well, share it, please.
1980, as I told you earlier, I had knocked on doors all across this district 2 times. Part of my district is in Lincoln County. And in my campaign, I had a little carpenter's apron that you wear, and in it, are these pockets so I could carry my bumper stickers, my door knockers, and all other campaign material that I needed, my brochures. So I'm in I've been knocking doors, and I started to go into a restaurant. And as I did, this gentleman came over and he said, "Give me one of those." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Give me one of those bumper stickers." He said, "That's Shedrick." He said, "That's the man I'm voting for." I just handed it to him. I said, "Thank you." I didn't tell him I was Shedrick.
You wonder if he voted for?
I don't know. Well, I won that. I won Lincoln County big, so maybe he did. Maybe he put that bumper sticker on, drove it all over Lincoln County, and helped get a lot of those votes in. But I appreciate it.
Was each campaign a little different each time?
Yes. The first campaign was not nearly as expensive. That was in 1980. In 1984, I did not get an opponent. In 1988, I did get an opponent. That campaign was very expensive compared to the first one. And then the next campaign, which was 1992, I was opposed by the same candidate that had opposed me in 88, and I did win that again by even a few more points, and that campaign was indeed very, very expensive. More campaigns were conducted in those times by targeting the voters, knowing who your voters were, sending mailers, to a specific age group regarding certain issues. It became much more sophisticated.
And more expensive too.
And more expensive, yes.
And you were elected to the Women's Hall of Fame.
I was.
Oklahoma's Women's Hall of Fame.
The Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame, yes. Very, very humble and very grateful for that.
You've had lots of awards over the years, from what I've read.
Probably the most exciting one was the Henry G. Bennett Award from OSU.
And that was for what?
The Henry G. Bennett Award is given to distinguished alumni. And I appreciate that very much, especially coming from my college, my university.
And your daughter went there and your granddaughter went there.
That is correct. My granddaughter graduated from there. I had two granddaughters, one grandson, and my daughter. Of my three children, it was only my daughter who graduated from Oklahoma State. My middle child, Scott, graduated from the University of Oklahoma, and our youngest son, Steve, graduated from the University of Arizona. Arizona State University, excuse me. And now with the grandchildren, my granddaughter graduated, and we had a picture made together of the three generations. And in fact, the three generations have worked here in this law office for many years. While she was in college, she worked here after school and did many, many things for me. And my daughter has been in the office here with me for years and has also run our family business for us.
Legacy family for sure.
It's fun to have your family at work with you if you can decide what the parameters are and how everybody gets along with them. And she's my best friend. It's fun.
Yeah, that's right. You're lucky. Yeah.
I am.
She's lucky too.
Currently, I'm serving as administrative law judge part-time.
Okay,
And I do that on Mondays and Tuesdays in Payne County and Logan County. And I do that with the Child Support Enforcement.
and you're there doing something with ethics?
I am. I'm on the Ethics Commission. And that's a major responsibility too. And I'm one of 5 who work with the ethics laws and trying to promulgate rules that are reasonable, but yet rules that require transparency, require disclosure. I think that's important.
You're the only woman on that one?
I am. I don't think I've been the only woman, though. Prior to me serving, former Senator Helen Cole, who I have a great deal of respect for, who's deceased now, was on that commission.
Did you serve with her? Did you
I
overlap?
did in the Senate. I enjoyed her so very much. Very, very respected woman. If she gave me her word, she would keep it. I treasured her friendship, too.
Did you have a mentor while you ran the legislature?
I don't know if I had a mentor, but I must tell you there were a couple of 3 senators that I really, really enjoyed listening to them debate because they were so elegant and knew the law and knew the facts. And I there were several in my time that I served that I really enjoyed watching them debate.
Yes. Any outside of the...
Oh, I enjoyed serving with all of our governors, but I must tell you, perhaps my most favorite was that of Governor Henry Bellman. He was a man that likewise would give you your word and keep it. Not that the others didn't, because they did too. But I had a special respect for Governor Bellman. One of the bills that I passed into law was that of creating the OSU Tulsa Hospital. The college, osteopathic college. We didn't have that until I carried that bill along with Representative Lawrence Gish, Larry Gish, and that's how we created it. And Governor Bellman was the governor during that period of time. And I knew that I had certain technical aspects that had to be done all in a limited time span to get that bill off of both floors and out of grossing and enrolling and to the governor's office and not come back, not be vetoed and not have to. And so I remember working with Governor Bellman's staff and getting the commitment that this is what we were trying to do, and did we have any problems with it? And I respected very much his judgment. Thought he had a lot of wisdom. Knowledge is one thing, but I think wisdom is superb. I think having wisdom is, I think all of us should aspire somewhat to have wisdom. Just a little bit.
Were you ever called into the governor's office unexpectedly? I've had some people say they haven't. They were scared, but
oh no, I don't think so. I would go down there on various meetings,
sure.
But I don't recall being called unexpectedly for something.
And you were voted top 10 legislator for several years, and
I believe I was, yes. Frosty Troy with the Oklahoma Observer did that, yes.
I recognize that name. Well, what advice would you have for women that are considering going into the political arena?
Go for it. Knowing that when you make that decision, you have to make that choice like any choice, knowing what your consequences are going to be. And I just think it's a worthwhile endeavor. I think that I would encourage any woman to go. I personally, I respect men and women who serve. I really do. And I don't have any discretionary feelings one way or the other as to whether you're a man or a woman. But I do want to encourage women to be involved for several reasons. One, I do believe that many times, especially when it comes to budgetary issues, small budgetary issues, and I don't mean to discredit women because women deal in major budgetary issues each and every day. But when you're talking about legislation that's going to affect the pocketbook of young men and women, and let's face it, we have many, many women in Oklahoma who are single family heads of household. And I just think we need that input. We need to be able to hear from women who face that on a day-to-day basis. We won't unless we get women in who are willing to deal with those issues. Many of the bills that dealt with women's health issues were supported by women. We started many of those issues. We did not have an insurance company that would pay for a woman's mammogram before I served in the legislature. And it wasn't just me. I had the help of others, but we had to get men who helped. But I don't believe that issue would have been brought to the forefront as a major issue without those of us who were women pushing that issue. The neonatal units here in Oklahoma, we didn't have those before women served. And I believe it was Representative Cleta Deathridge who was the main mover and pusher in the very first one we had, which was at St. Anthony's Hospital in Oklahoma City. And without that, we'd have lost lots of little premature babies across the state because we had no way to care for a severe preemie child. The list goes on and on, but most of those deal with health issues, education issues, and budgetary issues of families. And I just firmly believe that when you get a group of women together who are willing to talk about their issues, then you're going to have a force to deal with. And I think and it can be a positive force. I don't mean it to be, relegated in a way that's not, but it would be a positive force. And it would bring issues to the table that might not be perhaps at the top of the list, because for years, many of the issues were like, we've got to get roads and highways, we've got to do this. There were issues that didn't deal with the real needs, I thought. Not that we don't need roads and highways, we do. That's an important part too. But I think there are issues, and they have been addressed, and will continue to be, I think, if we get strong women who are willing to take that leap and get out there and run.
Well, do you have any other advice for them as far as juggling all the other?
It can be done. Women everywhere juggle. It doesn't matter whether you're in politics or what you're doing. There isn't a woman out there right now that isn't juggling between her grocery bill and getting the children up, and even if she doesn't have children, there's other issues. I do believe that our young baby boomers right now are juggling majorly, taking care of their parents and taking care of their children. So they're all sandwiched. We call them the sandwich generation, but they're there. And it's just another aspect of that. And I think that they'll find support groups. I think support groups are there to help. I've seen it happen before, and I think it'll happen again.
I'm going to switch my tapes just a minute. Okay, let's see. What else haven't we asked? I guess we need to ask what you've been doing since leaving office and how being in office has helped or not helped, I guess.
Okay.
Whichever.
Well, for one thing, being in office and then being out of office really helped my law practice economically. Really did, especially after my governor's race. I had more clients than I could possibly take.
Name recognition?
Yes, that's what it was, I'm sure. Plus, I believe I'm a good lawyer, so I think that helped somewhat too. But yes, that did help. And since then, when I left because I wanted to spend more quality time with my family, and that's what I've done. That's what I've done. And I have 2 offices. I have one at Grand Lake, and I spend time over there in Afton, and I have one here, and I split the time between here and there, and work with my daughter and my granddaughter and my grandson, and I go to Dallas, Plano, Texas, at least once a month. I burn that highway up because I have an 11-year-old granddaughter there.
Oh.
And in fact, when she first started school as a 6-year-old, I went down and volunteered sometimes once a month, sometimes once every 2 months to help her teacher. And it was great fun to see her interact with her friends in the classroom. And you get to be there like a little fly on the wall and be a part of all that.
Sure. Any plans to retire anytime soon?
Oh, I'm just going to, do what I want to do in terms, I need to, for me, I want to keep the gray matter stirred up. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy serving the judgeship that I serve. And I take the cases that I know I have the quality time to take now, and if I don't take them. And because I don't want it to interfere with that quality time, I want to be able to go and do things with my family when we want to be together. And we talk a lot every day, and we plan activities every day that will include not just us, but there are things we like to do to reach out to other people too.
So you accomplished most of everything you intended to while you were in
the Senate? Oh my, yes. I haven't done. I promised the good Lord that if I passed the bar exam, I wouldn't go on to school anymore. I'd spent a number of years in school. I didn't start college until after I had a family, and I was 25 when I started here at OSU. So I'll forever be so loyal and so indebted to OSU because I remember when I got admitted, I just skipped all the way across that campus. I was so excited and had very young children at that time, and fortunate, had them in some little preschools close by. My daughter at the time was in the 1st grade, so we lived across the street from the grade schools and just within 5 blocks of the university. So my little trip was take her there, take the other 2 3 days a week to their afternoon or morning classes, and then I would get to college right quick, and then I'd race home and pick them up and get the boys down for their nap and be able to get a little bit of studying done before Crystal came home from school, and enjoyed all of that.
And it was a bachelor's in education?
Yes, and a master's in education, and then my doctorate degree, of course, is in JD.
And you were in your 40s when you went after that?
I did. I was 40 when I enrolled in law school.
Were you one of the older ones?
I was. In fact, my husband at the time just encouraged me so. He says, "You've always wanted to do this. Go do it." And I said, "Yes, but I'll be 43. And he says, "You'll be 43 anyway." Why not have it in what you want? And I'm so grateful to have that. First of all, it's knowledge. It really gives you a lot of knowledge. Mm-hmm. It also gives you, in my opinion, it gives me a better understanding of how the common law evolved from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And in a civil court of law, it also gives you that, if you remember that we are a civil nation and that we resolve our differences in a civil court of law. And to me, that's the backbone of how we educate people along, with their educational process, but plus the fact to know that you don't take a gun and go out and deal with somebody, or a knife or anything else. You go to court. You can litigate it in a civil courtroom. And there's a person, if you can't go to mediation and work it out, there's a person behind that bench in that black robe. Once the evidence is presented, it's going to make a determination. You're going to have to live with it. And I think that is a system that, it's survived for many, many years, and I think it's a great system, and I very much approve of the jury system, and I'm so grateful to be able to enjoy this profession.
Are there very many more women in that same position across the state?
As attorneys and
and the judge,
Oh, I'm sure we do. I haven't, I'm just administrative law judge. I'm not elected district judge, or associate judge or appointed special judges, but we have a number of them that serve, yes. Not enough, but we have a number.
That was my next question. Probably not nearly as
And
many
I
as
think now that at least 50% of the law school classes are women.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that ratio is at least 50% now, which when I started night school at Oklahoma City University, we had 122 in our class, and I think we might have had 20 women. So maybe 20% at the time were women in 1980. And now we have 50%, pretty close to 50%, if not more.
If we could get that in the Senate and the House, would be great.
That would be remarkable. You know, many times, at least I'd say 5 or 6 times during the period of time I served in those 16 years, we used to have, on a alternating year basis, a national meeting of all women elected officials. Now, that included mayors, congresswomen, governors, lieutenant governors, legislators, presidents and vice presidents, which we have now. You know that all of that combined, we never had more than 1,000 nationwide. Now, that was in the 80s and 90s. I'm sure it's more now. But I really aspired then to think, oh, we've just got to have more of our gender elected, because I just believe in us. I was asked to go, I'm thinking it was in 1994, 1995. I was asked to participate in a conference in Argentina in which I helped young assembly women develop their programs, along with 4 or 5 other representatives from 4 or 5 other countries. And it was so interesting to watch these women. They were magnificent. Many of them had come to the United States and were educated in many of our Eastern universities and had gone home and made a commitment that they were going to improve their country, whether it was running for Congress, whether it was being a medical physician, whether it was being the head of a school, whether it was raising money to provide for health issues. They were doing it. And it was magnificent to participate. In fact, I met a very close friend of Eva Perón's, and it was wonderful to hear the history of how Eva and her husband went to Peru, you know, when they were exiled from the country. And in fact, she helped them somewhat when they were trying to get back into Argentina.
Special memories.
Very.
Any other favorite ones you want to get on tape?
I think that's all I can think of today.
From time in service. No. Check real quick. Oh, you did something with teenage drinking and driving, age 19 or 21, for something to do with drinking, being able to buy drinking age.
Oh, I did.
Change something.
Years and years ago.
Okay. And then a bill to place restrictions on use of campaign funds.
That was the ethics.
Okay.
Yes, I did. I remember that now. I remember that distinctly. Yes, there was limitations. That was before the Ethics Commission
I don't know if it
was
passed or not,
created.
but I was. And you served with Arlene Baker, who's not with us anymore. Do
That's
you
correct.
have anything to say about her? Because I
She was
haven't
a
had too many people say.
marvelous woman. Way ahead of her time. It comes from a long line of a family that are public servants. In the Tulsa, I believe she lived in Turley or Skiatook in that area. And she was a marvelous, she only served 1 term, if I can remember right, in the House of Representatives. Maybe she served 2. A marvelous woman. She was such an advocate of the Equal Rights Amendment. That's what stands out most in my mind about her, because she was of the generation that recognized the differences, I do believe.
And then Freddie Williams isn't with us.
Yes, and Freddie was another marvelous person. Freddie was just as determined in her own little way to get legislation passed, and she was successful in doing it. Freddie, was the one that developed breast cancer very early on, and she was a marvelous spokesperson for women to insist that women get those mammograms. In fact, she was one of the major House members on that bill that we finally got the insurance companies to pay for a woman's mammogram. They wouldn't do it. And Freddie was one of those who was a major sponsor of that. And perhaps Senator Williams can tell you more because she served in the House, I believe, with Representative Freddie Williams. And she knows Aline Baker very well.
That's correct.
Yes, in fact, she, I think, served as a pallbearer at Arlene's service. She had women who served as pallbearers.
Really?
She did. And Senator Williams was one of them.
Let me ask. And then Maxine. How do you
Maxine
pronounce her last
Horner
name?
is a marvelous person.
No, the other Maxine, Kate, with the Kenoshi, or how you pronounce
Was
it.
she a member of the Senate?
House.
Okay. Because there was only one Maxine I served with, and she was a great lady.
Horner,
yes. Marvelous lady. When we passed House Bill 1017, she gave one of the most remarkable speeches I have ever heard. And she talked about sitting at the back of the bus. And that was such a compelling, profound speech. I could not move out of my chair.
Would it have been recorded somewhere?
Oh, yes. Marvelous, marvelous debate. And brought to real perspective when you're standing there seeing this eloquent woman who was a former water commissioner for the city of Tulsa and had come to serve in the Oklahoma Senate. She was marvelous. She's the one who sponsored the current scholarship program for children, young people who enroll in it when they're like, I believe, in middle school, and if they keep their grades up and they're not involved in any type of illegal activities, then they get their college tuition paid. She was the major sponsor of that bill, and she pushed for it. It took her 2 or 3 years to get it passed, but she didn't give up. And that woman has tenacity. And I have a great deal of respect for her.
Any other ones you want to comment on? We did Helen Cole earlier.
Yes, and have you had the opportunity to speak to Senator Trish Whedon?
Yes.
She's another one.
She is great.
She started in the Oklahoma Senate, and while she was there, she decided to go to college. And she finished her degree at OU by commuting both to OU and to the Senate and taking care of her family at the same time. A lot of respect for her. A very fine young woman.
Similar to you, then.
Excuse me?
Similar to you.
Somewhat. Yes. I have lots of fond memories of her. All the women I served with. And at the time, we only had, we had Senator Cole, we had Senator Whedon, we had Senator Williams, we had Senator Miles LaGrange. Did I say Senator Horner? And me. We all had our picture made together. It's priceless for me. Absolutely. It's one of the greatest treasures I have. We were the 6 serving women of the Senate at that time.
I'll have to check if we don't have a copy. We need to borrow yours and scan
It's
it.
beautiful because it's taken in front. It's in the center of the dome area, and looking up behind us are the 5 prima ballerinas, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful picture.
Well, if you don't have anything else, my last question is,
Okay.
when history is written about you, what would you like for it to say? Doesn't have to be just about legislature either. It can be whatever you want.
Well, I hope that I'm remembered as a caring woman that had a passion to make a difference and was able to accomplish some of it.
Well, just from reading what little I have, you've accomplished a great deal.
Well, I hope it's been helpful to others. And if it hasn't, then I've got some more work to do. I've got a lot more work to do.
Well,
But I
hopefully
hope
the
so.
women that come after you will
I hope
pick
so.
up the torch. And
I hope so. I really hope so. I encourage young women many, many, many times to, follow their dreams, follow their aspirations. I got to do that. I just often marvel at, how that happened to me. I was a little girl from Chickasha, Oklahoma, and I lost both my parents. And then I'm separated from my brothers and sisters. And, how did I get to be so lucky?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have an obligation to give back. That I know. That is tattooed to my heart and my head. Otherwise, I don't think I could be doing any of this.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Nice to have met you, too.
Mhm.
Real pleasure. Thank you for doing this, too. It's a great contribution to
Women, hopefully.
women.